to be a conversation with the MetricsDAO community about our new payment structure. And so I am going to kind of summarize what we've learned over the past few weeks with bounties. I'm then going to throw it over to danner.eth, aka Drake IRL, to explain how we came up with the new payment structure. And then we'd really like to open it up to questions, feedback, riffs on the idea. So please participate in chat. Don't be afraid to come off mute and ask questions too. Like everything we do in MetricsDAO, this is an experiment. We are here to test, learn, and iterate. All right. So how did we find ourselves here in this situation of blowing our budget? So fast forward to about a month ago when we launched a round of bounties. And this was our first new set of bounties in a while. At MetricsDAO, we have been experiencing the crypto winter, like pretty much everyone in crypto has. And when the Terra crash hit and the economic downturn hit at the beginning of the summer, we lost a lot of momentum on partnerships and just hadn't run or sponsored any bounties for a couple months. And so we're really excited to launch bounties with some new partners, Aave, True Freeze, as well as some bounties that we funded ourselves through stablecoins in our treasury. And we funded these through a $250,000 loan from Flipside. And we had allocated part of that loan, about $5,000 a month, for these self-funded bounties. And so we launched the bounties and we launched Xmetric at the same time. And participation in bounties had quadrupled from anything that we had ever seen. We got some great responses, great volume of submissions, but we really didn't anticipate the number of submissions that would come in. And so it's a great problem to have, but when you don't have predictability in the payment process, you wind up with a lack of predictability in budget. And as anyone who's ever worked at a startup knows, that gets really dangerous when you're a small organization with limited or fixed budgets. It's not like we can go back to our partners at Aave and True Freeze and say, hey, we overspent, can we have a little bit more money? They're like, no, that's your problem. And same thing on our self-funded bounties. We need to make sure that we can balance and predict our costs. And so we worked with the team and said, this is fantastic. We want to capture the momentum that we have in the bounty program, but make sure that we can predict more of our costs around it, and make sure that we aren't surprised by how much we're spending every week. And so that's where this experiment came from. And I'm going to toss it back over to danner.eth to explain this particular experiment.
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, definitely this will help us a lot with projecting spend and having more control over the money or the assets that are flowing out of the treasury. But the other thing that I think will, really be driven here is that we want to disproportionately reward the best outcomes. So when we took a look at all of, the submissions that we were paying, say maybe we have 400 submissions, it looks like a standard bell curve, which means that our greatest spend is on the stuff that's kind of in the middle. It's good work. It's work that is close to being at the top level, but it's not quite there yet. What we want to do is ensure that our partners are getting the outputs that they need. And in different market conditions, those outputs might look different. So in a really, strong bull market, those might be, easier things. Maybe partners are looking more for user acquisition, things like that. In the existing kind of, bear market that we're in, or crypto winter, protocols are really looking for insights. DAppDAO, for example, a partner that we just started working with, they need data insights to make decisions as a team. So the hope is that this drives really strong outputs and aligns incentives with getting those strong outputs. And the other piece that's quite interesting about this as an experiment is that we think that this could lead to market dictated question difficulty. So something that we've seen at Flipside, and as many of you know, Flipside has contributed IP to MetricsDAO to enable us to kind of use the system, iterate on it. Flipside has a lot of stuff with question difficulty that drives how much is going to be paid out per question. I think that question difficulty, and some of our team members agree that question difficulty is quite subjective. Using a market-driven difficulty meter is something that I think is going to be very fascinating. So this is a little bit of a complicated system, but I think it'll actually, over time, allow us to fine-tune some parameters. Basically, what we'll do is set a budget for a challenge, and then we'll set a budget for various tiers within that challenge. So say we have $1,000. Maybe we want to say that half of that is for the top 5% of submissions. So $500 is going to the top 5% of submissions, and maybe 500 is going to the remaining 95%. So we're going to introduce some new screening methods in our review process, but overall, really excited to see how this works out. And thank you, CatJam, for posting a screenshot. I realized as I was in here that it was quite difficult to describe this verbally. So I'll take a pause there. Feel free to add anything on. I'm happy to talk, to anyone in the community, answer any questions.
Awesome. Please send us some questions and/or feedback in the chat. We'll take them as they come in. Dan or JD, wondering if you can tell us briefly about an alternate approach that we considered here and why we decided not to use it. Hint, hint, the one I've got in mind is claim caps.
Yeah, I appreciate the hint. So again, looking at kind of Flipside and thinking about MetricsDAO is an opportunity to iterate on some of the things that Flipside does and to experiment with them. Claim caps, in my opinion, and again, the team I think agrees, they create a situation where you have a lot of people trying to sign up for something that might not do it, and you also are then creating friction for people who might show up later who are talented analysts. I don't think that we should have claim caps in general, unless it's a situation where, it's a specific bounty that is really tightly budgeted that we need an answer to. So in general, I don't want to use claim caps to manage budget. But as CatJam mentioned, everything is an experiment. We're always iterating. So there, we'll continue to learn and figure out which direction to go here. But generally want to make it possible for any analyst to come in and participate.
Awesome. Looks like we've got a suggestion or a couple of suggestions from Tomo Data in the chat. One suggestion is claim tickets, which we just talked about why we're going to not go with that approach, at least for now. And then the next two are pretty interesting, talking about paying by difficulty. Or kind of tiering payments a little bit differently. So one suggestion is not to pay $200 to scores 10 and 11. And so this is a great idea and actually very aligned with our solution. We are going to pay not based on the kind of absolute numerical grade anymore, but on the ranking. And so if the top 5% of submissions are all 12s, then they will split the piece of the pie that's allocated for that submission bucket, so 50% of payments. If it's a particularly challenging question, which we assume that this will happen with more difficult questions, they'll score a little bit lower, but we'll still disproportionately reward the best answers to difficult questions that wind up in the top 5 or 15% of submissions. So another kind of interesting aspect of this experiment is how we hope to capture kind of a market definition of difficulty rather than a program assigned definition of difficulty. Because this is another thing where like something that's difficult for me could be totally easy for Drake. And by that, I mean everything that's difficult for me, analytics-wise, is easy for Drake. There could be something that's hard for Drake that's actually easier for another analyst. Difficulty is just super subjective, and we think best determined by the population of analysts that are picking up bounties. I see some more typing in the chat. I'm gonna see if anybody else has questions or feedback on this approach. Anson, definitely looking forward to doing some nerding. Any suggestions that you've got for our programs? Love to hear them. Always love welcoming new people onto community calls. Ooh, great question from Marina. Drake or anyone else on the Bounty Ops team, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, happily. So it says, do you envision a possibility where stellar submissions would receive smaller payouts per analyst than the tier after? So Marina, let me know if what you're saying is that like we stack rank everything, and then you're saying that people that are in the top 5% are getting lower payouts than people that are in maybe say the next 20%. If that's what you're saying, I don't think that we should ever run into that situation because using a percentile ranking system should drive a situation where the top analysts are always getting disproportionate payouts. I don't see how this could happen. But if someone can devise a scenario where it could, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Again, this is one of those places where experimentation iteration will give us some actual results.
Hey, Drake, maybe a follow-up question to Marina's. What happens if there's a tie? Like the top 10% of submissions all get a 12?
That's a really good question too.
I know the answer to it if you want me to chime in. I really
I'd
set
love
you up
that.
without a hint this time. Um, so one of the features of our peer review process is that there are three graders who look at each score. So the final score that you see on the showcase page is kind of a rounded average of those three scores. So we have, a few decimal points to fall back on to hopefully rank them more granularly and not wind up in a situation where there's a really big tie. As always, we default on being fair and transparent to analysts. And so whenever there's a tie, the tie is broken in the analyst's favor.
I just had like a suggestion for a tie. Maybe you could let people with over a certain amount of X metric vote on tiebreakers or something like that. Maybe that would be an interesting way to do it.
Oh, that could be really interesting, like a competition, like a March Madness bracket of bounty submissions.
You could like joke race them too, kind of.
Oh, we should joke race some.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, Jekka, if you want to talk more about that, DM us. I'm trying to think about what program we have coming up that we could try that out for.
Definitely.
A couple other comments in the chat I was responding to, but I'll just come on voice and talk about them. Tomo said, what about a case of someone who's ranking third in the top tier, where another person ranks third in the second tier and receives payment? I don't think that's a possible scenario. Payments should basically just be scaling down from your rank against your peers. So like right now we're using raw numbers and saying that an 11 equals this many dollars. Whereas in this case, it'll be more like, here are all the submissions. Here they all are stacked ranked against each other, and then funds start to be deployed to those in order of their ranking. There would not be a case where you would be a top stellar person and not get a payment. The other comment here is around the grading. So feel that the faster the grading is done, the easier it is for users to upgrade themselves, and be sure to pay special attention to the comments and suggestions of each user. So this is, I think, in regards to if we have faster feedback loops, then everyone can continue to improve. Totally agree. On a longer time horizon, would like a lot of these various processes to be running in a more asynchronous manner so that everyone is getting feedback as quick as possible. Starting to think about how to implement that now, but definitely very philosophically aligned with that. Feedback loops and communication are super important to getting better.
Awesome. These are great questions. Would love to hear any other questions you've got or suggestions for how we could do this in the future. I love the idea of a race or competition that you use X metric to vote on. Anything else like that, like, again, we're here to experiment and get creative. So really welcome this kind of stuff. All right. I'm going to seed a question for us to kind of wrap up this part of the chat. If this payment program is successful, what do you think? What do you think the program will look like moving forward? Like, what are the kinds of submissions that we'll see, and what are the ways that the bounty program might look a little bit different?
I think one thing that jumps out to me that would change right away is our ability to plan. So I think a lot of people in the community or bounty hunter network are often asking, when are we going to have more opportunities to solve different challenges? Up to now, it's been difficult for us to do that because of the unpredictability in the budget. If we have set budgets, we'll be able to introduce a bounty calendar that's forward-looking. Super excited about that. Am expecting lower submissions, but better submissions. So curious to see if that holds true.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree that I'm a planner, and I know that a lot of the bounty community are planners too. And so the ability to set a calendar is something that I'd really love to get to. I'm wondering too, so we've talked about disproportionately rewarding the top percentage of submissions. If you're not right now an expert bounty hunter, or a top analyst, are there other ways to participate in MetricsDAO?
We've definitely got the blockchain analytics course going on, which is awesome and a great way to learn more on-chain analytics skills, data visualization skills, get a better sense of the tools available to you when you're solving different analytical challenges. Also a great place to just network, meet other people that can help you think about problems differently. I'd say that's probably the main place that I would look. Or anything else in mind for you, Cat Jam?
Yeah, the other thing I'm thinking is all of the workshops we have with data providers. There's a lot of free educational content in there. And something that someone brought up the other day to me is that they didn't expect to be in the top 5% and like win the top tier. But we're planning to continue submitting bounties so that they could get free feedback, basically, and continue to improve in the hopes of becoming an expert analyst one day, which I thought was a really nice perk of the peer review system.
That's a great call out. That's a fantastic opportunity for analysts to get feedback and hopefully earn some money while they're doing that as well.
Marina mentioned in chat too the social influencer bounties that we're running. So every bounty that's submitted, we post publicly on the showcase page, and we're actually running bounties to promote bounties. It's very meta, but to promote the top submissions through the program. And what's really awesome about this is it's the opportunity to help our analysts' work be seen more widely and have more of an influence in the industry, but also for people who are interested in analytics to really study the work of top analysts, talk about why it's so awesome. And again, just another opportunity to participate, to get paid, and learn from the best analysts in our community. Great. Anything else that comes to mind? Again, feedback, ideas, always welcome. Please feel free to drop them in the general channel. We'd love to discuss, and we're excited to have another blog post and a call in a few weeks to talk about what we've learned from this experiment. Thanks so much for tuning in and for the feedback and participation. Really appreciated, and thanks for being part of the MetricsDAO community.